Here we see the procrastinator in their natural habitat, hunched like an arthritic simian over their keyboard, poised to write, yet finding themselves scrolling social media and going to put the kettle on yet again. It's a story as old as time, and one that I'm surprised, if I'm honest, ever got written at all. Welcome to the Failing Writers Podcast.
Before we start, I'm reminded this week of many sort of popular girl and boy bands in history where members have suddenly just gone off and done things on their own, leaving the other members behind. Because this week, you two have been off speaking to writers without me.
John had a bit of a brainwave, and he sort of dragged me along with it, yeah. In other news, that's possibly the first time I've ever been compared to a boy band.
Or girl band, yeah.
No, just boy band.
All boy bands, they tend to have one person that's just kind of holding them back a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the band.
I think I would probably, if the boy band thing, you'd be the attractive, cute one, John. That's not that talented.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, yeah.
But it's just there for eye candy. I'm the ungainly, slightly ugly one. But, you know, a lot of talent, but not quite, he's a bit podgy. Why is he dancing around on stage? He's the one he's the talented one.
So I'm the one who feels like I'm holding you back a little bit, but ultimately goes on to have the most successful solo career.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right.
You're the one who always gets drunk.
Yeah, I see a little
and
bit,
embarrasses us.
A little bit of a drugs problem, unkempt hair, appearances in nightclubs, record label threatened to drop you. But I mean, yeah. That's where we're at.
Somehow it all works out in the end.
Yeah.
I'm going for. Yeah, all right, okay.
But anyway, John, what was your brainwave?
Well, it was kind of because I have recently had a significant birthday, one of those with a 0 on the end. But when that happens, you do inevitably, even though you're only actually a day older than you were the day before, it does get you thinking about age. And I was thinking about how much is age a factor in writing, and especially in becoming, you know, a successful writer. Is it actually an advantage to be older when you start writing properly? Because hopefully you've got kind of more thoughts in your head, you've had a bit of time to think, you've had a bit of life to live.
Or are you better being younger and having all that youthful exuberance and energy to write and just getting stuff out, yeah.
You're fresh and unsullied. So we thought it'd be interesting to chat to someone just setting out on their writing journey. And I thought, what better place to look than TikTok?
That's where all the kids are. That's down with the kids, isn't it? Yeah,
that is,
exactly.
That is a place to find children. Which sounds like a terrible sentence, but yeah.
So I had a little scout around on TikTok, and I found a young woman called Aline Dufflocq who lives in New York and has been vlogging about her life and about writing her first novel and stuff. So Tom and I had a little chat with her. So Aline, I'm guessing you're probably wondering why you're here.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, the honest answer is that Tom and I, we're quite old and disillusioned. And I suppose we thought it might be nice to try and remember what it's like to be young and optimistic and have the world laid out there before you. So no pressure. That's what you're here to represent.
Very flattering. I love being described as young and have a lot of time, especially since, I don't know, I think existentialism gets us all. So I don't know. I'll try my best.
Okay, brilliant. As long as you're trying, as long as you're putting the effort in.
And just for clarity and openness, as rude as it is to ask, what sort of age bracket are you?
No, you're all good. I turned 26 in October. So that's it. I'm halfway through the decade, really. Now we're in it.
So do you think of yourself as young and at the start of things, or trying to remember back when I was 26, I thought I knew everything. I don't know why you.
That's a really good point. I keep telling people that since turning 25, I could really feel my frontal cortex click into place.
Really firm up and come into its own.
Yeah. So I'm in a whole new era personally. I do think back, and it does feel like I used to be made out of jello. But yeah, I do feel like a fully realized person, but well, now I'm old enough to know there's room for growth. So
Yeah, well, it's all downhill from there. Yeah, as soon as you realise all these great thing about youth.
Once you realise you're not perfect, that's a real bummer.
Yeah, and then it just slowly unravels over the next 20 odd years.
Wow, I don't even want to know how bad it could get, really.
And where would you say you are in terms of your writing, your career? You've got kind of what stage are you at? What have you done? What have you not done? What do you want to do?
I definitely feel more legitimate than I have when I was doing the initial pivot, which happened around COVID. Because all the things that I used to do creatively couldn't do anymore, and decided to do the thing that I liked the most, I guess, but never carved out intentional time for. But it's so funny. I remember starting then and thinking, I'm so behind. But now I feel a little bit more settled into it. I'm on the second draft of my first novel, and the first draft took me like 3 years just because it was really hard. I'm
glad you said that. I'm glad you said you haven't just knocked it off in a few months. Thank God.
None of y'all are kidding. It's some tough work. Yeah. So I think that working on this story for so long, it feels exciting to see that slow progress is better than no progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what genre is it that you're writing in?
It's a fantasy novel. So it is fantasy. I've been trying to write.
Oh my God, does that mean it's like 200,000 words long as well, or not?
My first draft was like 103,000 words.
Right.
Hefty.
Manageable, but hefty.
There's a lot of garbage. So there's a lot of stuff that trimmed.
By the time you got rid of that, it's going to be about 10,000.
Exactly. 10,000 perfect words. Really going to set the scene for my great work. Yeah, but to answer your question, I guess I feel a little better about it, not as dejected. I think I started out really sad for some reason, just thinking, I didn't go to school for writing. And I think that at first that's the lie, that you had to be formally trained and all this kind of stuff. And then you grow older and you meet all kinds of people and genuinely realize that stuff is kind of made up. Practice is a pretty useful tool as any for learning on the job. So I'm lucky enough that I live somewhere that I meet writers all the time, and the stories are also different. I think that if I was still living back where my parents live in Montana, I might feel a little more isolated, but there's a lot of people who are kind of experiencing the same thing in different ways on completely different timelines. So I think that's grounding.
Is that the reason for you moving to New York?
I moved initially. My sister was already here and she's my best friend. So in a little codependent move, I thought, how convenient. Cute. And then I had studied theater, moved here for theater, and initially thought I want to be a stand-up comedian. So I did that for my first year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and it went fine, but I don't really like being up after 9:30. So I realized that in the long term, I'd like to get some rest and maybe write something quietly with myself.
So have you brought comedy into the book that you're writing?
I think so. I think that's sometimes my my inner voice sometimes when I'm reading is, this is joyless, sometimes when I'm toiling away. But when I get to go back and do revisions, that's almost like the first thing that I look at is it engaging, and does it have, the humor that I like to embed into every day. And certainly my other work, because I try to do essays and short stories on the side to try to also hone my craft. So those tend to be a little bit more lighthearted. So I try to make sure that my main project is also getting that.
Interesting what you were saying there about where you are affecting your writing. It seems dead obvious, but I don't think I've ever really thought about it that much.
I reckon that it's true. That I think the more stimulation you have, the more likely you are to write interesting stories, aren't you? Because if you have very little interaction with the world, like a lot of writers do, just penned up in our little holes, you're potentially just borrowing from things you've read or watched on TV. Everything's like secondhand. But I think if you're out there in the world, with a job and doing stuff, you're writing from life, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, I think you've got to have personal experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a city, because you also, I think you need sort of headspace as well. Because I've recently moved from quite a busy area to a very quiet area, and it does make a big difference in how much time you've got or how much space you've got to actually think about stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I think it also depends on your personality, doesn't it? Because some people can write in cafes and some people need like proper space, like quiet time.
And I thought it was great, the idea, if you are somewhere busy, like, because I don't think it doesn't matter where you are per se, because it's about getting involved and absorbing stuff, isn't it? It's about listening to people on the bus or making use of the drama at the local church group, or it could be in the middle of a big city. But something interesting about being in the city is whenever you're somewhere like that, New York, brilliant example, you're going to be able to find, there's so many more people. You can find like-minded people. You can find people that stimulate or groups or all these kind of things that are there for you to dip into. And when she was saying about that, it made me think of like 19th and early 20th century, when you hear about the London coffee shops or the cafes in Paris where all the big name writers would hang out and chat about life and all these grand Victorian ideas and things. That's got to be a massive stimulation, hasn't it?
Yeah, and the bigger the city, then the more intense all of that stuff's going to be, I think.
Yeah. Getting back to Aline, John asked next about the core motivation for writing, which was a good question.
This is a really difficult question, Aline, to answer, I think, but one that I think I've become increasingly interested in. And I think the answer is probably different for everybody. But why do you write? Like, what is your kind of key motivation? Where does the desire come from, do you think?
Oh, that is a hard one. But I think that it does shift and change. It does feel like some sort of connectivity with childhood in some kind of way. Because when I look back at being a kid, creating and writing were some of my first outlets. And I used to do that with so much freedom and less judgment. And when I can get into those places again, when I can tap into somewhere where I'm not being overly critical and I am just enjoying what it is, and also feels like my brain is clicking and working the way that ideally I would like it to 99% of the time, it does feel like some sort of reconnection with something that I used to really enjoy and prioritize before I knew about the things like judgment and, oh, this is not useful enough or productive enough and things like that. So I think that's where it comes from. Is I've always enjoyed telling stories. So when I can tap into that as it is, feels nice.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned childhood. I always wonder if it's tied up with your kind of foundational conditions of worth. If your teacher went, oh, you're very good at telling stories, or your mum said, oh, I've just read your poem, it's lovely. And it's something as simple as that means that, that just gave you such a kick when you were a kid that you're always chasing after that same thing.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree. My mom was a big crier, but I remember one time I read her a poem that I wrote after we had a fight. I don't know what kind of fight you can have when you're 8 years old, but I remember I went to her bedroom to read to her at her bedside, and she was so moved. She shed a tear, and I thought, bingo, yes. That's the stuff.
That's what we're going for. What about you, Tom?
I just think if that's your reaction to an argument as an 8-year-old, I think there is an element of being destined to be a writer, isn't there? I'm going to show you. I'm going to write a poem. Yeah.
My words.
Yeah.
Sweet words.
I wanted to ask whether you've got, at the tender age of 26, plan. Like, do you have aspirations for where you'll be when you're 30, 40, 50, whether you'll be published, or what's your dream for the future?
Yeah, great question. I mean, to have a plan, but be flexible with the goalposts. So I'm on my second draft. I want to finish my third draft by the end of the year, take the fourth for the year after, so 2025, and then start sending it out to like beta readers and people for feedback, my community members who I've met along the way, and then maybe see if I can get an agent. I do feel lucky where I have some vague connections, just, people who know people. And I feel kind of, I don't want to say confident, but I feel like there are people who would help me if I presented something quite good. So I'm just trying to do the quite good part right now, because that feels like the essential thing. So that's my plan in terms of this draft. I want to, hopefully this project will just get me an agent at the very least. Would love to think that it's the next big thing, but who knows? I do work in coffee right now, and that's nice, but what if I didn't, So I would love to be pivoting more into a full-time writer territory in the next few years. I'm launching a Substack, hopefully by the end of the month, and would love to generate like a little extra income there and hopefully be able to cut down part-time in my survival job and then just have a healthier balance between the two. And that's kind of my initial plan. But, subject to change. I have been doing some copywriting freelance for the last several months, but turns out that stuff is dry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just slightly changing the subject. You post videos about your writing life on TikTok and YouTube. Aside from being a barista and writing, how much of your time is spent on that little creative project?
Sometimes I would like to think too much, because it's become another stream of income and a way to amplify I always say like creative legitimacy, because writing is so isolating and it is hard to sometimes feel like you're not a big faker. But I really have enjoyed those outlets for sure. YouTube has been something that I've been doing since I was truly 15 and in my high school bedroom. But it's become tricky because it's hard to manage the writing and then this sort of marketing of the writing. And there are times when working on the marketing for the writing project is kind of taking away a lot of time and focus from just the actual writing of it. And sometimes it's hard to focus when I think to myself, like, oh, I should be getting a clip of this coffee shop and I should be recording my fingers going da, 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 da. And sometimes when I'm like going the da, 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 it's just pretend so that shot looks nice. And my brain is actually doing no work in that department. But I think that a lot of like young people and people my age, we feel that pressure to be the person who markets us and pushes us to the foreground. It feels like having a bargaining chip in so many conversations and markets that are so saturated. It feels like every other person can do what you do. At least maybe you could point to some kind of number and say, but look, people are interested. So just a balancing act, really hoping one doesn't take away from the other.
Yeah. I think our problem is partly we're old and we don't quite understand it. But I'm guessing you must get a fair amount of engagement on there. Is it the future? Is that where we should be plying our trade, Tom and I? Posting a video a week on TikTok?
Whatever social media avenue feels the most authentic is the one that you should put your time and energy into. Sometimes spreading it far and wide is not always the answer. But, if you want, I mean, I don't know. We're talking about a TikTok ban over here. So I don't know. Maybe that's if not, there's always, you guys, your Instagram page, it looks great. So you could always do reels, That's all I got.
Yeah. It sounds like work. Yeah. No, we could. I mean, we could do lots of things. That's mainly our problem, to be honest.
To be fair, our problem isn't doing other stuff, procrastinating from writing. We're quite good at that generally, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's kind of our thing, in fact.
But wouldn't you argue too that creating a podcast is also a form of that in a way? You are creating another medium about writing. They are just in different formats.
No, absolutely. We started the podcast to try and help ourselves put pen to paper, as it were, on actual writing. And it has helped. It has helped overall. But it is another time sink. It's another way to avoid writing at the same time. But yeah, I think overall it's helped.
Isn't it lovely to hear someone with such an immense amount of hope and positivity?
I know, it reminded me of being young, of like kind of thinking, this could happen, and then this could happen, and this will happen as well, rather than, no, there's no chance of that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, is it?
No, it's lovely, wasn't it? Saying, I'll do that, and hopefully I'll get and she wasn't being arrogant. There wasn't arrogance of youth, was it? It was just like, I'm going to do this, and then hopefully I'll get an agent, and then... But it's like it's all possible. It's still possible.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think youth helps with that, doesn't it? Because you basically have got all the time in the world. You're not in a particular hurry. Whereas for us, the clock's ticking a little bit more.
Yeah. Now you feel like we are. Yeah. And you've not had the knocks along the way that make you think, no, it's not. It doesn't really happen like that. But I did think something else she said was interesting was about we're talking about the online stuff and social media. Never really thought about it in those terms, that young people it's not like an option. No. If you're not in it, you've missed out. It's like a standard, isn't it? It's like a requirement.
Yeah, it's almost expected, isn't it? By publishers, by other people.
But, social media or non-social media, you got to get your inspiration from somewhere.
Yeah.
So maybe that would have been a good question for you to ask. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Well, let's see if we end up talking about inspiration and the like in this next bit. You never know. You never know.
Right.
I feel like I'm constantly up against this warped Joe March version of myself that I would like to pretend that I am, hungrily writing something in the attic by candlelight because I just need to get it out.
Yeah.
I felt that very few times in my life.
Just when you were arguing with your mum when you're right.
You're right. That's actually the key. So I always just strike up a fight whenever I need to be.
That's what you need, anger. Yeah. You're like the Incredible Hulk of writing.
So sometimes I feel this kind of spark, but that's usually for if I'm just starting something new or I'm just the beginning of a scene that I couldn't figure out, and suddenly I'm like, oh, that's the thing that I should be doing, or this is the way it should be done, or poems, personal essays. There have been things that come out quite quickly because they'll come from a place of real raw inspiration, which is very different from when you're working on a long-term project. It is something that I think takes discipline and just showing up as often as you can. And sometimes it's really bad. Last week, I only wrote stuff that this week I'm completely deleting. So you go back and forth about how it might be worthwhile. But yeah, I think the most important thing is trying to show up. That's what I tell myself, because you can only be a genius every so often.
Put the time in.
Yeah. No, I mean, not even the time. And like sometimes you just have to, there's this book on creativity, which I think everybody talks about, called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Oh, yeah.
But the book on creativity, really great. And she talks about the idea that, I think it's the Romans had about genius being something that you have, not something that you are. And the idea that you just are a genius full time is very modern, as opposed to having these sparks that possess you every now and then, and it's not up to you when they come to pass. So hopefully, if it comes to pass, you're kind of already at your desk and you can get something down.
I like that idea. And then the more often you sat at your desk, the more likely you are to be in the right place when the lightning strikes.
Yeah.
So come on, how many hours a day writing?
Come
on.
I mean,
average.
A day is tricky because on my days off, I try to get at least 3 to 4 hours in. So 2 days a week, hopefully, is 6 hours. And
this sounds like one of Dave's answers. Come on.
If you average it, it's probably an hour a day, but I don't write every day. So yeah.
That's pretty good. In our estimation, that's actually really good. So well done.
Thank you. Wait, how about you guys? How much are you averaging?
At the moment, it's probably similar.
Yeah?
But that's a rarity.
Over the last 20 years, though, John, what would you say?
Yeah, over the last 20 years, probably more like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Something like that. Pretty poor.
I found that point about genius being a visitor rather than a kind of a weight on your shoulders, and you either got it or you haven't, quite freeing, quite inspirational.
Do you feel the weight of genius upon you?
No, but I think you feel like you need to have it. Otherwise, during what have you got to offer if you've not got that? If you've not got that special something, then what's the point? Whereas actually, the idea that, well, do you know what I mean? If you just crack on, you might be lucky, and it might visit you just by chance almost.
I see it like you really don't need genius, do you? I mean, there's some really successful writers that clearly are not geniuses, and I don't mean that in a mean way. But genius can send you off in certain directions, can't it? And make your writing quite niche, not necessarily massively popular.
Yeah.
So maybe not always great to be a genius. And aren't geniuses also always a little bit miserable?
They don't really talk about geniuses without saying flawed genius to a lot of the time.
It does go
hand in hand a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So a genius is like a visitor that you don't really want to come round.
An unwanted visitor.
No, you want them to come round, just say hello, but not hang around too much.
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily let them in. Just have a bit of a chat at the door, and then off they go.
Yeah, it's not so much about genius, though, is it? Just about the idea of flashes of inspiration to do.
The muse.
Yeah, and that's not something you can rely on. And actually sitting down and doing an hour a day, that's how you get there.
It does come.
It's about being present. Yeah. So that was a fantastic chat with a young up-and-coming author who hopefully will go on to get an agent and become a successful writer. and she was in her mid-20s. So the other side of the coin, John, you said you were going to dig out someone who was a little bit older. Did you manage that?
I'm not sure that's a great metaphor to use under the circumstances.
It's not a good ratio, is it? Like, there's something slightly off on that balance.
But you are right in the sense that, I thought it would be nice to talk to someone who was very young when they started writing, and also to talk to someone who was a little bit older when they started writing and how they feel about it. And so we got in touch with Babette Hughes, also in America, and she has just published a book, and she is 101 years old.
What?
101 and a half, I think, yeah.
Yeah, would you like to hear her?
I would.
She's a marvellous woman. All right, let's talk to Babette. Babette, you have lived through the most extraordinary things, not just in terms of the Great Depression and the World War and, the 60s and things like that, but also just in terms of your own life as well. Do you think that's what gave you the impetus to want to write, having experienced all this stuff?
I do think so. I wrote a memoir 10 years ago, and I guess many books since. But people are always very interested in the memoir. That's what they want to know and read.
Yeah, I get that. Tell us a bit about that first book. Because you were kind of playing detective as well, weren't you? You were trying to find out more about your past at the same time.
Yes, when you talk about the Great Depression and Prohibition, those were absolutely huge influences in my family's life.
Yeah, your father was a bootlegger, is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
And he was among the first that used Prohibition to, make a living. There's a very interesting thing that I never knew and just discovered, that the Prohibition is what brought the organized crime mafia into this country.
Right.
That we wouldn't have had organized crime if we hadn't had Prohibition.
Wow. Well, that was a big mistake.
Yes.
Yeah, and particularly for your father as well, because he was murdered, wasn't he, by the mob?
Yes, he was in his 20s. He was arguing with the mafia about their trucks. They would bring alcohol down from Canada, and they would overlap and fight, and that's how my father was killed. And when my uncle, my mother's sister's husband, came to visit, my father, who had been hiding from the mafia in the house and didn't go out because he knew they were after him.
Right.
But when his brother-in-law came to visit, he took him out to a favorite cigar shop. And coming home, they were both murdered. And, it was such a tragedy that the two young wives and my brother, myself, and my uncle's child heard the shots, ran down in their nightgowns, and found their husbands dying.
Wow.
In the driveway. That's where they were.
And how old were you, Babette, at that time?
I was 2 years old.
God.
And when I was old enough to ask, where's my father? She lied. She told me he died of pneumonia.
Wow.
That was because of the shame. And her story is also interesting. She was raised in an orphanage among 500 kids.
Wow.
Talk about drama.
You're not kidding. I mean, as formative experiences go, they're quite traumatic. Do you feel like any of that that must have fed into your writing?
Absolutely.
I mean, beyond your memoirs.
This last one is my 9th.
Wow.
And you're absolutely right. What happens, I believe, is that these horrific experiences go into our unconscious.
Yeah.
And that's where the good creative stuff is, in our unconscious.
When did you write your first book, Babette?
I was a very late bloomer. I think it was in my 70s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's never too late, people. It's never too late.
Proof.
That's what I hope to explain.
Yeah. That means we can take another 20 or 30 years off, John, before we do anything.
There's no
That's
rush
good, isn't
whatsoever.
It? That's good. Pressure's off.
What do you think it was that made you sit down and write that first book in your 70s? Was there a particular thing that happened, or just you just made the decision one day?
It was that I was now married and supported, so I could write full time.
I see. Yeah, that's definitely helps, doesn't it? Because it is so time consuming.
Yes, absolutely. And there really isn't any support for the arts as we would wish.
No.
How do you go about your writing, Babette? Do you plan it all out? Do you just fly by the seat of your pants? How do you tend to write?
I write early. I try to get up about 5.
Wow, okay.
And I sit down and I write. And the idea that you get inspiration or you get some kind of eerie help.
Mm-hmm. Divine inspiration, yeah.
The only thing for me that works is sitting there and writing. And most of it you throw out. I think I keep maybe 10% of what I write.
Wow.
Yeah.
In my life experience, there's no such thing as an inspiration. When you're there, when you're writing every day, that's when the unconscious will appear. For example, you're writing and you come up with a couple of sentences or a paragraph and you like it and you don't know where it came from. It comes from the unconscious.
Yeah. But it sounds like you need to practice that, is what you're saying. In order for that to work, you just need to kind of keep using that muscle, keep practicing over and over again.
Perfect. That's exactly right. And I think people that want to write, maybe they don't stay with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So sorry to interrupt, chaps. I'm just going to break into this interview for a second because I noticed, and you do see this occasionally online, and I do understand the feeling. But there was someone on Twitter saying that they often see other writers on Twitter talking about how many books they've written and published a book, etc. And this person was saying, in some ways I find it quite discouraging because I'm already 33 years old. And is it too late for me, is what they were asking the question, 33 years old.
And our reply back to you is, yes, I'm afraid at 33, that is way too old to do anything, isn't it?
But the thing is, it's all comparative, isn't it? Because I do understand that feeling. If you're looking at other people and they're all in their mid-20s and they've all... And because Twitter looks like that as well, doesn't it? It looks like everyone's doing better than you.
Yeah, that's true.
And I kind of get it. I understand.
No,
it.
It does do that to you. It does do that to you. But at the same time, when Babette was the age of that Twitter poster, the Beatles hadn't actually formed. So it feels like there might still be some time left.
Puts it in perspective.
Yeah, it does put it in context.
Yeah.
So I think what we're saying here is that you might still have some time, and that's a nice thing. Even at the age we are now. Well, I'm kind of talking for myself, really.
I mean, even at the significant birthday you've just had, John, you're still not even halfway.
Exactly.
To
not
where
even
Babette
halfway.
is, so,
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, just wanted to interrupt. Back to Babette. You wrote a kind of a murder series, the Kate Brady series. Is that the kind of stuff you like reading? Is that where that came from?
Yes. And the short answer is yes. But I think it's not unusual, don't you? I mean, people like reading about murders and crime.
Yeah, it's popular stuff, isn't it?
It is.
I'm trying to write a crime thing at the moment.
Oh, really? How do you write? It work?
He writes slowly.
Yes, I get it.
It's true, I do. I do a lot of agonizing. That's how I write.
Sort of a love-hate thing, huh?
Yeah, probably. But I very much like you. I force myself to sit down and I just get it done, and you look up after an hour and lo and behold, you've got some words down. That's how it works.
Right.
It's amazing. But it does feel like a little bit of a struggle to me. Is that the sense you have, or does it come quite easily, the actual putting down of words?
Well, I was just going to ask you what I feel and other creative people that I know. Don't you think you felt better or you feel better when you're writing?
Yeah, I can get lost in it. I love that feeling, that feeling of being in the zone and just getting completely lost in this world and the characters. I love that.
That's what brings us back over and over again.
Yeah.
Don't you think? I mean, you feel good. You feel different. I do. I feel more, I don't know, more centered, more comfortable with myself, actually happier.
Right.
Isn't that true in your work?
I think so. I think this is a really interesting question, and we probably should ask more writers this question. What is the compulsion? Why do we do it? Ultimately, what is it that we get out of it? I'm not totally sure. I think it's lots of different things.
I think you would get a lot of different answers from a lot of different people.
Yeah.
I think for some people it's about getting their story out there. For others it is an escapism and they don't care if anyone even reads what they've written.
Yeah.
And probably for some people having their thoughts read by other people is a huge boost to them as well. So I think there'll be all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah.
That's a very good point that I think creative people want to communicate to others. That's part of it, isn't it?
I think that's the same with all humans, isn't it? I mean, we are communicating animals, aren't we? But that's what we do.
And it's not always easy to communicate what we want to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the hard bit comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, fiction's a lovely way to do that, isn't it? It's a lovely way to express yourself. Because in a way, you're not really talking about you, but in a way you are. Secretly.
Exactly. That's exactly. Yes, fiction has its own pleasures and challenges.
Yeah, it really does. Let's talk about your latest book. It's a novella about a journalist turned Nazi hunter, which I've just finished reading and very much enjoyed, called Lessons in Evil. Tell us about that.
Well, the tragedy in Germany among Jews is my generation. I would have been right there if I had been born in Germany instead of America. So that gave me what I see in hindsight was an emotional identification with those poor souls that got caught. And therefore, I think this book has a lot of emotion because I have that emotion. And I think that's what I like about this book.
Yeah. I
tried for authentic emotion in the plot.
Yeah, that very much comes across. As well, when I was reading it, some of the stories in the book, I mean, they're probably the most moving bits, in a way. There's some of the stories in the book about Jewish families escaping Germany during the war. They felt very real. And I was wondering if any of that was kind of based on any experiences that you'd heard from, friends or family or...
It's total imagination being in that generation and being Jewish. I mean, there, but for the grace of God, it was a very real thing for me. It wasn't just a, terrible academic and all of that. It was me emotionally with those terrible events.
Yeah, it's very hard not to put yourself in their shoes, isn't it?
Well, I think you do put yourself in whoever you're writing about.
So you're bringing a lot of yourself into what you write.
You have to, because that's to me where the good stuff is within ourselves. Yeah.
The book brings up for me a really interesting question. The question of, can you separate an artist from their life or from their actions? Because one of the characters in Lessons in Evil is this very well-respected, critically acclaimed writer. But there's also obviously quite a big question mark over her past at the beginning. It's very hard for us to separate art from artist, isn't it? How good are you at doing that? Or do you think we shouldn't?
many great artists were horrible people.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
You're right. It has nothing whatever to do with, your virtue.
Yeah.
These, you could probably do a whole research study on how many there are in word.
Yeah. I imagine as well, if you start looking into great artists' lives, then you're just going to dig up more and more skeletons, aren't you, probably?
At the end of the day, they're just people, aren't they? And people are flawed and often not very nice in places. Well, they are just people. And often these people have ridiculous amounts of money and adoration and people stroking their egos. It's not a good recipe in many ways for people being quite nice.
I think we sort of hold them to a higher standard as well, don't we? Which doesn't help.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It does kind of burst your bubble, doesn't it, when you find out that someone whose music you like or art you like or whatever wasn't, if John Lennon was a wife beater, say, he can't sue us now, can he? It does affect your interpretation of it. It doesn't mean you don't appreciate how good it is, but you can't ignore it.
There are so many mysteries, aren't there, about what we're talking about. And for me, that's what I try to accept and not solve. You just have to live with mysteries because life is full of them.
Yeah, sometimes it's better not knowing, maybe. Yeah. So, Babette, is that it now? Don't tell me that's your last book, because I don't believe you. You can't just stop writing.
I'm 101 and a half.
We don't want your excuses, Babette. Come on now. Well, granted, that is an excuse we haven't heard yet. That's the first time we've heard that one on the podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
My age card.
Yeah, you've played that one, yeah. Yeah, well, is there another book in there?
I don't know, but I know I have a lot to say about aging.
Right.
Well, I was going to ask you that. We obviously, before you go, we need to know what the secret is to a long and happy life.
My answer is that you do not accept your cultural lies. It's in our culture, and I don't know that much about your culture, but I don't think it's very different because everybody ages, everybody dies, and nobody wants to do either one.
So it's a form of acceptance in a way.
Yes. So our culture tells us, at least in America, that when you're older, your life is over. You are old. That is so wrong. And that's what I try to say.
Well, you are the proof of that, to be fair, Babette.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not even a secret. It's that our culture is wrong about so many things, and that's one of them. Aging could be the best years of your life. Your kids are grown. You don't have, pressure of career and relationships and work life, and you have more choices because you have more free time and you can rediscover yourself.
Yeah. Well, I've never looked forward to aging more than talking to you, Babette. You're an inspiration to us all.
Absolutely.
I don't think I'm that unique. Again, our culture is so powerful. We all believe it. We all believe I hate to use the word lies, but we all believe the misinformation because culture is so powerful on us.
Yeah. You think that makes us kind of slow down and give up before we need to?
Oh, again, it can be the best years of your life. And I'll tell you, being young isn't any good.
Well, being young at the moment is very difficult, I think.
I think it's always harder than we expect it to be. There are a lot of pressures. As you get older, you will get wiser. You will know more about yourself and the world. And it's a good time.
Well, you're making it sound great.
Yes.
Babette, thank you for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's been really lovely hanging out with you and finding out about your book. And I hope you keep writing. Maybe we'll speak to you again when your next book is out.
Okay, I like that. And listen, I've enjoyed this so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.
I always find that a fascinating discussion about separating art from the artist. It's really, really
It
tough.
can go down some dark.
But do you not
alleys,
feel
can't
it's
it?
one of those? It's one of the few arguments where you can kind of argue against yourself on it.
Yeah,
you kind
yeah.
of-
Yeah.
You properly sit in both camps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
yeah.
we've all got exceptions to the
Yeah,
rule,
yeah.
haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, they're a terrible person, but look.
I think the way I resolve it is that ultimately everyone's an arsehole.
Yeah.
In some way or other, everyone is just a terrible human being.
And some of them are just good at drawing or singing, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't think that's true, though. I think there are genuinely really lovely people, aren't there, who are amazing at
Well,
what they do.
probably.
And you do. There's a little part of you that thinks, yeah, they should be celebrated, perhaps more than some of the people who might have put great art out, but they weren't.
That's true. I don't doubt that. But if you dug deep enough, there'd be something that they've done.
You reckon? Yeah, maybe.
Deliberately put the wrong bin out to confuse the neighbours, or so there'd be something that they'd have done at some
Cancel
point in their
them.
lives that you could go, yeah, I'm not sure I can
Yeah.
carry on liking that book anymore.
And
So-
things like that will only get worse as the time period gets stretched out as well. So someone who's written a book 100
Yeah,
years
because we
ago,
get so much more offended.
there'll be
now
a
than we used to.
different morals and
Yeah.
different, what's right and wrong.
They ate meat. Something like that.
Maybe in 100 years' time, it'll be, God.
Yeah.
Something like that. Another thing I thought was interesting there, you'd asked John about putting yourself into the characters. And it kind of, I mean, it's sort of an obvious thing to say, but obviously, I think that's what it means, isn't it, when people say, write what you know? That's kind of where it goes. People often mistake that for write what you know is kind of almost mirror your environment that you're in and your life.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is it? It's about those
No.
real truths, those inside truths, those heartfelt truths that that come out of, like Babette said about her family history and the sort of the Jews and the Nazis and things she'd kind of seen and lived through and that were kind of close to her, that she can then take that essence and put that into things, separate it out into different bits so your character can be in different characters. Or I think that's such a true thing to say about writing.
Yeah. But even then, that speaks back to what we were just talking about, because in order to write sort of fully rounded characters and different characters, you have to have at least experienced thinking bad things, even if you haven't done bad things. Do you know what I mean? You have to be aware of the negatives in order to put that into characters.
That's very true.
So-
It's complex, isn't it? Way above our pay grade. We shouldn't really be talking about these things, should we?
Let's move on from
Let's
that.
move on before someone mentions Hitler. Speaking of Hitler, mind-blowing fact, speaking about how old Babette is, I hope she doesn't get offended, but just keep going about how old she is. Aline, at 26, when Babette was 26, World War II was just finishing.
Bloody hell.
Blimey.
I'm sorry I go on about this. It just doesn't stop blowing my mind.
I know, it is incredible.
What she's seen and gone through. When she was talking earlier about, prohibition started. What? That's a historical.
That's from history. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
For Aline, the same time period is like the Spice Girls got back together or something. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah. She won't have a clue. Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of Aline, John put her on the spot right at the end. We've got a clip here now to play, basically asking her to write her own blurb, and she did a fantastic job of doing just that.
She did. If you had to cram the essence of Arlene's story so far into the blurb on the back of a book, how would it read?
Ooh, do I have to talk about myself in third person?
Yeah, go on. That'd be good.
Aline Dufflocq is a Chilean-born immigrant who moved from Chile to the United States at 10 years old and spent time in Montana learning to enjoy country music with the windows down before moving to New York City, where her love of theater and stand-up eventually settled on writing. She writes all sorts of stuff and appreciates you buying this novel. She worked probably very hard on it, so that's nice. Yeah, when she's not writing, she enjoys time with her cat and making cake.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
That was very well done.
Yeah.
I'm
I like
sweating, so.
Nice little insight there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another question for you, but we'll leave you now. What time do you start work, by the way? Are you working today?
I'm off today, so
nice.
happy to be here.
No, I was going to say, how about we reconvene in like a year or a couple of years and find out how you're getting on? How do you feel about that?
That sounds so fun. Sounds almost like a time capsule. I'm into it.
And then we'll do it every 10 years and we can kind of grow old miserably together in our festering pit of failure. That'd be
what
great.
Everybody craves. Yes.
We're unlikely to make it to 101 considering the way we've lived, but who knows?
I all love to Babette. My great grandma lived to 104 and she was sharp as a tack. So I think that the people who make it that far, they are strong of mind. I don't think I've got that in me, but who knows?
Okay, it's a date. We're meeting in a year or a couple of years, something like that. We'll give you a bit of time to properly finish that novel.
Yeah.
Get it out there.
God, hopefully, I don't want to play that clip back.
That's the worrying thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you will have done something. I mean,
for sure. Something.
Well, she'll have to now, won't she?
Yeah, she will. Yeah, we put a bit of pressure on you now.
No choice.
I know. That's good. I can tend to skew boring. So hopefully I'll go out and I'll be very risk taker for the next.
Yes.
So I can have some stories.
Okay, perfect. And if anyone wants to follow you, we will obviously we'll put all your info in our show notes and we will point to that.
Great start to the day. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. And good luck with everything.
Yeah.
It sounds like you know what you're doing and you're having fun doing it. And that's kind of the main thing, I think.
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh, Aline, it's been so nice to meet you.
Thank you
and
so
find
much.
out about you.
All right. Have a great day, you guys.
All right. Thanks again. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. It was almost like she'd been asked that question before, Aline.
Maybe.
What a lovely job she did.
Didn't she?
Yeah.
Maybe we will catch up with her in a year or so and
that'd be
see
nice.
if she's still got all that youthful exuberance and whether the corner's been knocked off. She's like, oh, yeah, no, you were right, guys. Life is generally a bit of a downer. I didn't realise at the time.
Yeah.
But now I see what you mean.
Now I understand why you're all so miserable. Yeah.
But that was brilliant just to see, just to talk to two great people as well. But obviously it was intriguing how much of their viewpoints and stuff completely overlapped.
There were definite links between them, weren't there?
Yeah, it's just like the timelessness of written communication and how it works and where inspiration comes from and how to write. Doesn't really change, does it?
No, I think that's right.
Fascinating.
Have we answered the question, listening to those guys, whether it's an advantage to be younger or older? Or do you think it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever?
Well, I think we've answered the question, and I think it doesn't make any difference.
It's just different, isn't
Well,
it?
if it does make a difference, it balances out in different ways, and it's just people are people and different. And I mean, I don't think we have answered the question to some extent.
No.
I'm not that bothered because it was really interesting and nice to talk to them.
Well, I'm glad you two had a nice time swanning off and chatting to people.
This is where Dave rolls up next episode. He goes, right, guys, here's someone 140 years old.
It's interesting. I was reading an article, sorry, just staying on the age thing. I was reading an article from last year about the fact, apparently, there's an increasing hunger from publishers for older writers.
Is there?
Which I thought, yeah, exactly, is a nice thing to hear.
Hold on a minute. Does that mean that we're going to get to a point now where we get something through and they go, I'm sorry, you're not really old enough for what we're looking.
Give it another 20 years.
Damn it!
But yeah, there's been a spate of older writers doing very well. Bonnie Garmus, Lessons in Chemistry, she's 67. But apparently publishers actually actively looking for older writers.
Wow.
And I think that's partly because the majority of readers are kind of mid-40s and upwards.
Well, we're an ageing population, aren't we?
But unfortunately, just to put a slight dampener on it, that it doesn't seem to apply to men quite so much.
Right.
And I think that's because men don't read as much fiction. So maybe
yet again, as white middle-aged males, we are
doomed.
It's always
pushed down and
always
just always on the wrong end of things, aren't we?
Handed the shitty end of the stick from birth.
But yeah, it's nice that people are actually seeing a value in experience and are mature reflection. As we have very mature views on things.
Yeah, so all we need to do is be mature and have a fully rounded life experience. Oh well, never mind.
Time waits for no man. That's what they say. It melts like a snowman till it's all gone away. With every decade that passes, my trousers get more ill-fitting. Each wrinkle, each grey hair amasses, reminds me of all the words I've not written. I need a way, need to harness my hunger. We're all decaying, ain't getting any younger.
So before we go today, we promised last episode that we would have a work in progress from Jeffrey G. N. Harrison.
Yeah.
His story Divided. So we're going to have let's have a little listen to that, and then we'll have a little chat about it. Divided by Jeffrey G. N. Harrison. Chapter 1. Divided, we stand. I was standing there, next to the surgeon, watching him firmly and carefully cutting along the edges of a wound in the side of someone laying on the operating table before him. A red line of blood, adding to that already released by the wound, was tracing the path of the scalpel as it sliced through flesh. A nurse mopped up the blood to keep the area clean for the surgeon. The curious thing that hit me was the simple fact that the person on the table was me. I was lay there on the table, but I was also standing at the side watching the event. A memory flashed before my eyes of the car heading towards me. The headlights were blinding me as they reflected off the rain-soaked road. I heard a squeal of tyres assaulting my ears as the driver tried to avoid the inevitable. The squeal was replaced with a flat tone from the heart monitor when my senses returned. I was back in the room in time to hear the surgeon ask for everyone to step back as he placed the defibrillator pads onto my chest. There was a buzz. My body lurched, and nothing changed. The flat tone was still playing, and the nurse started to pound rhythmically on my chest. Overtones of Another One Bites the Dust played in my mind with the consistency of the beat the nurse was keeping. I fancied myself standing next to Freddie, singing along, and shaggy-haired Brian strumming like there's no tomorrow behind us both. I saw the surgeon begin another attempt with the defibrillator, and I gently smiled. "Stop, it's okay, I'm all right," I said. "Just let me go." I knew no one could hear me. "Clear," said the surgeon. Another buzz. Another lurch. Still, a flat tone. "They're going to keep trying," said a man that had appeared next to me. "Who the hell are you?" I yelled, a little louder than I expected. None of the medics reacted to my outburst, but the man at my side took a step back before he smiled and stepped forward again. Henry Costa, Ghostbuster extraordinaire, or I was," he replied. "Was?" I blurted. Remembering my manners, I smiled back. Taken aback by his polite introduction, I offered a handshake and I introduced myself in return. "Jimmy Jones," I said with a bright smile as we shook hands. "Well, James," Henry emphasized my full Sunday name as he released my hand, "you have a few options. 2 real solid ones, and 1 vague non-choice. Firstly, you can go back into your body, shell, meat, whatever you want to call it. I have heard them all. Once there, you should, hopefully, live a long, prosperous life." I nodded. "The so-called blue pill." "You could give up and go to the light, as they say," Henry continued, unfazed. "I don't know what's there. I've never seen this mythical light." His tone was bordering on sarcastic and defeated, all at once. "That sounds like the red pill option," I said. "Or," Henry pressed on, ignoring his growing irritation with my interruptions, "you can take option number 3 and get stuck for eternity. At least until that good old light appears. Just like me." "What's that option? A brown pill? What are these pills you keep referring to?" Henry was clearly not impressed with my interruptions. How long have you been dead, man? They are references to one of my favourite movies. I died in the early 1980s. Prince Charles had just announced his engagement, I believe, which would be around 60 years ago by my reckoning, scoffed Henry. Besides, I was never much for films and television, too far-fetched for me. Even some documentaries included some level of fiction from what I recall. I smiled. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that, and it's not 60, not yet. It then dawned on me that the surgeon was still trying to revive my body, and my attention returned to the action before me. I can tell you, Henry continued, you don't want to get stuck like me. It's a literal hell on earth. Henry was now staring at my body too. I thought I could see a little envy creeping into his eyes. But what am I going back to? Your life. The surgeon tried again with the defibrillator. When my body lurched this time, I felt something pulling at me, tugging at me, drawing me back into the shell. At the same time, I could see a light begin to form in the corner of the room. Can you see that? I nudged Henry, pointing to the light. Henry looked and shrugged. I don't. We each see our own future, he replied. There was a flurry of activity around the operating theatre now. They all seemed excited that there was something positive happening. The surgeon did his thing again with the defibrillator, and the pull was much stronger this time. In fact, I was moved nearer to the table. At the same time, the light in the corner got brighter. It was almost blinding now. Time felt like it was speeding up. Another blast of the defibrillator from the surgeon, and I was looking up into his eyes. He didn't register I was looking at him, and I realized that I was actually back in my body, but my body was not awake. I turned to look at Henry, who just smiled and waved. It was almost a salute. He faded from view as he lowered his arm again. But, I started to say, I heard the buzz of the defibrillator once more. And then, there was just darkness.
So he told us he's entered the open novella contest on Wattpad. And yeah, on the back of what you just heard, he got into the second round, apparently.
Well, that is true, John. But breaking news, I saw on social media that he's actually now on the long list. He's made it to the long list.
Hell.
How good's that?
That's amazing.
So yeah, well done, Jeff. Like anyone cares what we think about it now, but we're going to carry on and tell you anyway. But hopefully we'll encourage a few more people to go and have a read of it on Wattpad.
Yeah.
So what did we think?
Well, I tell you what struck me, because there's an interesting way of putting it, because there was quite a lot of sort of extreme stuff happening, and we've read more than Tom's just read there. There's a lot of extreme events happening, but it was all described in quite a simple sort of way, which I thought it gave it a good contrast, if you know what I mean. There were it could have been, you could have been forgiven for making the reactions really strong and like, oh my God, this weird stuff's happening. But actually keeping it sort of simple and understated gave it a kind of power of its own.
I think because it's in that first person as well. I think you get maybe the reflection of the character, don't you? That he's not always the sharpest, but he's kind of, he's trying to take all this in and work with it. And you kind of get that through the writing.
He's very low key, isn't he, as a character?
Yeah, exactly. Because
nice.
I would have crapped myself if I woke up dead tomorrow. I would not be happy about it. So it's seeing a different way of dealing with that was interesting, I thought.
And a nice concept is kind of it's a bit like Sixth Sense meets Quantum Leap, or It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, I thought a bit Quantum Leap, and that's a big tick in the box.
So we're saying Henry is Ziggy.
Exactly. That's how it feels, doesn't it? He's got that kind of feel to him.
Yeah.
Like he's not always around. Sometimes you want him there, and he's not there, and then he pops up.
Yeah, he's like the bit of a guide. Yeah.
Well, I liked Henry's sort of aloofness, and it just kind of that he had that. I don't know, when they're bringing in two different worlds, it almost like you can see that Henry's working to slightly different rules on his side of the fence, and that's confusing to someone from the living side of the fence. And I think that came across pretty well.
I thought there were nice clues to the main character's life without spelling it out as well. Like there was a line, I saw the surgeon begin another attempt with the defibrillator, and I gently smiled. Stop, it's okay, I'm all right, I said, just let me go.
Yes.
And it feels like that's a nice little clue as to the current state of the man. He's sort of cleverly he's begun to set up the character arc right at the beginning, which is what you need to do, isn't it? As a man who's resigned to his own death. So you know that there has to be something going quite wrong with his life if that is the case.
But at the same time, it could go one of two ways, couldn't it? Because you could either be somebody who's thinking, do you know what? I've had a good life. I'm quite content with my lot. You know, if it ends now, that's fine. Or it could be someone thinking, do you know what? If I can get out of this shit show of a life, that I'm fine with that. Do you know what I mean? So it starts to set up the character, but it doesn't give you everything about it in one hit.
You also find out later that no one seems to care that much that he's been in a major accident and nearly died. Do you know what I mean? I don't think anyone visits him or something.
Yeah.
So you kind of start to wonder what has gone wrong. Has he sort of cut himself off from the world? Is he a bit of a recluse? And is that what this whole adventure, is doing? Is it going to rescue him from
he's going to try and rescue his sister, but is it really about him rescuing his relationship with his sister?
Exactly.
We say no one was bothered, but there's one bit I absolutely loved that just got me perfectly when I read it, was so after the bit we've read there, and he's going home and gets a taxi back, and it's just written really nicely where there was no one around, it was a quiet afternoon, so I was shocked to hear someone call out to me. "Hey Jim," came the familiar voice of Mrs. Bramwell, the kind old lady from next door. Mrs. Bramwell was standing at the end of her drive. Images of the delicious cookies she always made for me came to mind. You think, oh yeah, so there is someone that cares. This is good. This is good. I was about to answer with a friendly hello when I remembered I'd been to a funeral 2 years ago. I just thought it was a lovely, it's just because you kind of got, it's just such it enough. And then you just went, oh yeah, shit, no, he's seen loads of ghosts, isn't he?
Again, very low key.
Yeah, exactly. It's all very understated, isn't it?
But you felt it through, again, being in his mind there. You kind of felt it in his kind of sort of slightly dazed, almost like slightly anaesthetized mind.
Yeah.
What? Who?
Oh,
what?
yeah,
Oh, wait a minute. No, you're dead. Yes, I thought it was really well delivered. Really well delivered.
Yeah. Another thing I thought it was nicely. It had a sort of nice filmicness to it. If that makes sense. You get the feeling that Jeff he's seeing it in his head like a movie as he's writing
after the
it.
Netflix deal, isn't he? He's basically.
That's what
exactly.
He's after the film deal. Yeah. Any little, criticism?
Pearls of wisdom. Criticism.
Pearls of wisdom,
Pearls of criticism. We got any pearls of criticism?
Let's keep them pearls. Yeah. I was going to say it felt a tiny bit unrefined at the moment, but I strongly suspect, because I know this is a work in progress and it's an ongoing project. I'm guessing that Jeff is kind of just ploughing forward to get to the end before he really starts crafting all the language and tightening the humour and stuff. Because we've read Jeff's stuff before. We know he can write. But I think it's got great potential. It's got all the bare bones of a really good story, hasn't it?
It's a good concept, isn't it? And it's brisk. It takes you along with it.
Yeah, but it's not trying to... I like the fact that it's not trying to describe the world too much. Do you know what I mean? There are clearly rules to dead people, but we don't know what they are yet, and I'm quite pleased about that, rather than sort of, laying it all out right at the start.
We're learning as we go, we're learning with him, I guess, aren't we? Yeah. But nice.
Yeah, well done, Jeff. Thank you very much for sending it in. Much appreciated. We've been pestering for a little bit, so he eventually gave in and sent something.
He did.
So that's good.
He did.
That's good.
Do you think, is that, like being able to see dead people, is that one of those inconvenient superpowers?
It's not the best one.
Do you think is that a good thing?
I mean,
do you think?
Being able to shoot lasers out your eyes or being able to see dead people.
I don't think it's that great. Because you don't want, like you're sitting on the loo or something, you don't want ghosts watching you.
I think people underestimate just how many dead people there would be knocking around as well.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have a little crowd.
Everywhere.
Actually, that made me think about that when, there was the scene where he's in a taxi and the taxi driver's dead mum is sat on the seat next to him watching him. And that always makes me think of that. If that was true, if there were ghosts watching you, think of the stuff that they would see you do, which you really wouldn't want anybody else to see.
Yeah.
That'd be horrible, wouldn't it?
What sort of things, Dave?
Well, just like... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you think, I don't want anyone to see me,
Actually, that would make a really funny scene. wouldn't it, in this book? If the main character, Jimmy, is sat on the loo and there's a small crowd gathering around.
But I know Henry's just there and he doesn't get that this isn't something you should be doing now because he's so far in the spirit world rules that he's completely forgotten the living etiquette. Yeah.
He's forgotten that this is weird. Yeah. You can have that, Jeff.
Yeah,
you can
put
have
that in.
one.
Put that in.
So, if anyone wants themselves a bit more of that, the first few chapters are up on Wattpad.
Yeah.
So, get over there, have a read. There's some links in the show notes. So, well done, mate. Very nice.
Right. I think we've reached our allotted time period, haven't we not?
I think we have. I think we've wrung everything out of that.
Squeezed every drop.
And what's the moral of the story, Tommy? What's the big takeaway for today?
It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're rubbish at writing, you're fucked.
You're fucked at any
There's a
age.
message.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. But on the other side of that coin, if you're any good at writing, it doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah.
You've got a shot. So,
Round, beautiful.
The message is just get good at writing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Just keep doing it until you're good.
Exactly, because genius isn't something you have. It's something that might visit you if you're in the right place.
So just make sure you're in when it calls for
when
you.
It knocks on.
Otherwise,
you
don't want to come home to find a note from Genius saying, I popped round, you weren't in, that's it for another 5 years. Yeah.
Speaking of flashes of inspiration, we've got another episode next week where we've got the rest of our interview with Samuel Burr, whose book, The Fellowship of The Fellowship of Puzzle Makers is currently out and doing ridiculously well. We've got a chat with him before that happened, talking about how we hoped it was going to go really well. So I don't know if that means we're partly responsible for that or not. I don't know how it works.
I think it does.
Yeah, I think we can take that.
Yeah.
Chat with him.
Right. See you later, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And hopefully see you next week.
Yeah, take it easy, everyone.
Cheers.
Hello.
Where's everybody gone?